At 6:40 in the morning, a supertanker sits motionless in the Strait of Hormuz. Its engines are running. Its hold carries 2 million barrels of crude oil. 21 nautical miles away, on the other side of a narrow channel, lies the coast of Iran. The ship's captain is waiting for a single word from a naval escort before he moves another mile. This is not a broken-down vessel. This is a system holding its breath. For most of the 20th century, the Strait of Hormuz was simply a line on a shipping chart, 90 miles long, connecting the oil fields of the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. By the middle of the 2020s, it had become the single most consequential body of water in the global economy. The place where a regional war could decide how much the entire world pays to drive to work. In 2025, roughly 20 million barrels of oil pass through the strait every single day. That is close to a quarter of everything the world consumes. Add in liquefied natural gas, most of it from Qatar, and you are looking at nearly a fifth of the planet's gas trade as well. Funneled through a channel where the shipping lanes themselves are only about 2 miles wide. There is no substitute route. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have built some pipelines that bypass the strait. But Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Qatar have almost nowhere else to send their exports. If Hormuz closes, that oil does not simply find another door. It stays in the ground, or it sits in a tanker that cannot move. This vulnerability is not new. In the 1980s, during the war between Iran and Iraq, the conflict spilled directly into these waters. Both countries began attacking tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. In April 1988, an American frigate, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, struck an Iranian mine and nearly sank. The United States retaliated 4 days later with Operation Praying Mantis. Sinking Iranian warships and striking oil platforms in a single afternoon, still remembered as the largest one-day naval battle since the Second World War. Then, on the 3rd of July that year, tragedy struck in the same waters. The USS Vincennes, tracking what its crew believed was an incoming Iranian fighter jet, fired on a civilian aircraft. The United States Navy called it a tragic and regrettable accident, the result of confusion in the middle of an active naval engagement. The case went to the International Court of Justice, which in 2003 dismissed both Iran's claim and America's counterclaim. Even after that war ended, Hormuz never fully settled. Tankers were seized in isolated incidents in 2019 and again in 2023. Analysts wrote about the strait the way people write about a fault line. Not if, but when. For decades, though, the answer was always the same. The strait bent. It never broke. Iran's response came almost immediately. Its Revolutionary Guard closed the Strait of Hormuz to foreign shipping, warning every vessel in the water that passage was no longer guaranteed. Within 48 hours, vessel traffic through the strait had collapsed by an arrested 70%. Tankers that would normally thread through in a steady, practiced rhythm instead sat idle or turned back entirely. Some shipping companies began rerouting around the southern tip of Africa, adding weeks to journeys and enormous cost to every barrel.
Brent crude prices surged.
In the days that followed, reports of mined waters, damaged vessels, and at least one sunk tugboat began to accumulate. Over the following months, more than a dozen merchant ships would be damaged, several abandoned outright, and seafarers would be counted among the dead and missing. For the first time in modern history, one of the world's most important choke points was not simply disrupted. It was, in practical terms, closed.
In April, a temporary ceasefire brokered by Pakistan raised hopes that the strait would reopen.
It did, briefly, though shipping companies later reported Iran charging tolls of over $1 million per vessel to guarantee safe passage. Diplomatic talks in Islamabad broke down. The United States Navy began blockading Iranian ports. By June, a new agreement reopened the strait toll-free, and traffic slowly began to return, though nowhere near its usual volume. Then, in early July, attacks on commercial vessels shattered that fragile calm, and the strait effectively closed again to routine shipping.
The economic consequences reached far beyond the Gulf.
Fuel shortages and price shocks rippled outward to countries that have never had a ship pass anywhere near Hormuz. In the Philippines, thousands of miles away, the disruption to roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply helped trigger an energy crisis of its own.
It's a reminder that this waterway does not just move oil. It moves the price of nearly everything built on top of it.
As of this recording, the situation remains unresolved. Regional powers have signed new defense agreements. Planned military strikes have reportedly been called off more than once to leave room for negotiation. Diplomacy continues in fits and starts, and so, in a limited and closely monitored way, does shipping. What the 2026 crisis exposed was not a new weakness. It was an old one, finally tested at full scale. For nearly 50 years, governments, oil traders, and insurers had treated the closure of Hormuz as a worst-case scenario worth planning around but never quite believing in.
The strait had bent through the tanker war.
It had bent through decades of smaller seizures and standoffs. In 2026, for the first time, the world found out what happens when it does not bend.
20 miles of water, at its narrowest point barely wide enough for two supertankers to pass safely side by side.
The tanker at the start of this story eventually moved.
Most of them eventually do.